The monster was the computer, where they went into a restaurant where everything was like self-serve, and the technology got a little screwed up, and Mulder didn't want to leave the tip.
Yep.
And when he didn't leave the tip, the internet came after him, and everything in their life became crazy and threatening. All the technology went crazy on them, and I think hundreds of little drones were trying to attack them, and I thought that was, while it was exaggerated, that feels like everyday life in a way, the monsters of everyday life.
Yes.
So that one always hit a chord with me too.
Anybody else?
Well, Flute Man.
Yeah.
Of course. Every time I have to use a porta potty for anything, I'm always just like, what about this? But also one, I think just because it was one of those times where I made the mistake of watching it like in my room in the dark, like when I was supposed to be asleep. But there's an episode where they go after Mothman. Yes. They're out in the woods, and it's just like the red eyes just show up. Yeah, I didn't sleep. I didn't that night.
Don't get the Jersey Devil.
Yes.
Jersey Devil would be good.
It wasn't there one with Chupacabra?
Yes, Chupacabra. Yeah. That was a good one. But you had your hand up? No? No. Okay. Yeah, but Tubes, especially because of the fact he's one of the ones that was definitely not human. In the way he could just squeeze into places and things. And you got to think about what that guy's body count had to have been. But I've always loved, there's this one meme that went around for ages that, Scully and Mulder are out looking for monsters and just can't find them. And then there's Scooby-Doo, which is going out and finding monsters, but they're actually just people. But they believe, and Scully doesn't, so like Scooby-Doo is the anti-X-Files.
Were most of the monsters in X-Files, they were all like experiments, originally experiments?
A good chunk of them were.
The Agent Spender was one. He mutated, I can't recall the episode.
Yeah. But one of the things I always did like about the X-Files though is they did try to keep it what if, mysterious. Now, mind you, they played it too long. Eventually you've got to commit, okay, is this stuff real or isn't? And they would plant in the seeds where we would see, oh yeah, okay, there actually is a demon, whatever, but Scully just could never prove it. Which, again, like I said, you can do that for about 4 seasons. After that, it really starts to get, you can't find nothing. Are you good at your job? Are you an investigator? But yeah, there was a few different experiments. There were the twin kids, Eve 8 and 9. If I remember those. Just 2 daughters, just twins killing people out, clones, secret intelligence government project. Again, the 90s were a weird time if you weren't there.
Someone mentioned this the other day that we got a lot of monsters in the 90s were because we had the Human Genome Project.
Oh yeah.
So DNA was like this big thing, and the genetic manipulation became like this fear that people had that they're going to mess with their children in vitro, and eugenics might come back. And so now all the creators were like, what if this goes horribly wrong? Like, what if we mess with people's DNA or infant's DNA?
Or what if we don't let the DNA change?
Right.
Which is the peacock family. But yeah, well, and if you look at history, we're always looking at new science and getting scared our minds out of it. Because, in the 60s, it was all, the 50s and 60s, it was all radiation. Radiation is going to make giant bugs. It's going to make people 50 feet tall. It's going to make a radioactive lizard stomp the hell out of Tokyo. Radiation was the big bugaboo. And then in the 90s, like you said, it became the genome, and everybody became genetically manipulated, genetically modified. It wasn't new to that because Tom was the genetic modification in the 60s, but in the 90s, that was the big thing. Everybody was, we've modified the DNA. And nowadays, it's like nanobots. Nanobots is the big scary thing. So definitely in the 90s, there were quite a few where it was the genetic stuff. Does anybody have?
I like the episodes where they touch on stuff that's like reality, like when they had the one with the voodoo, where it's something that is based actually in reality, and they touch on the points where it makes it more scary because it's not so outlandish. And those are the ones that I enjoyed, where it was touching more on the aspects of reality in our current life versus, having something outlandish, more outlandish.
Yeah, it was. X-Files, I think, was at its peak when it was more grounded in that we're trying to take a serious look at this myth and what it could actually be. Like there's the one set here in Georgia where they find the plesiosaur. It's season 3. Quagmire was the name of the episode, and they write it off as, oh, it's just an alligator. It's a really big alligator with a long neck, and but it turns out that there's a plesiosaur living in this little lake, eating people. As we all know, Georgia does have lakes that like to eat people.
I always thought it was interesting after watching like Supernatural, because Supernatural had episodes where they were FBI agents, and it was always called back to X-Files. For me, X-Files was more or less like, if this genetic, if something would happen, they would go check it out, and it would either be, it was never really a person, it was someone who was changed. I always thought they weren't really monsters, because we've had this conversation, all weekend about what actually makes something a monster. Didn't I have that last night?
Yeah, that was last night.
That was last night. So these people were just, they were just existing. They weren't necessarily malicious. A lot of them, especially the ones like the plesiosaurus.
It's
just an animal.
Yeah, it's just living his life in the lake, and people keep poking it.
Yeah.
Or even the Fluke Man way. He is freaky, but he's not really evil or malicious. He's just a poor mutated bastard trying to make his best life he can in a porta potty.
And people freak out when you see him.
Well, yeah.
That's terrible. We have to kill him. Like Frankenstein.
We could do a whole panel on ugly is evil trope. It's like, good people are pretty, bad people look dumb. And look dumb. I'm a professional speaker. But thankfully we've gotten away, or at least we're doing our best to get away from that trope. But it's definitely, there's something, like we were discussing this in the Lovecraft panel last night, about our brains are wired to identify asymmetry as good, as looking like us as good, and anything that varies from that makes us go, ugh, which is why Lovecraft works, is things have the wrong number of eyes, or they have tentacles, or they're not symmetrical, and that makes us, that just hits our panic button because it's not us, and it's an instinct that we have to try to overcome. Like you said, you look at the Fluke Man and you go, ugh, and he's like, no, really, I'm not. And that reminds me of another point, is like, I don't think it came up much in X-Files, but the uncanny valley effect, how something, it does look human, but up to a point that you're like, it's not just right. What happened that made that a thing for people? What almost looked human but wasn't, that we had to get away from? But that's neither here nor there.
Well, we have a whole anthropological discussion about Homo sapiens and Homo erectus, Homo neanderthalis. Maybe that was something that genetically we're wired to see something that looks like us, but it's not us. But they were so closely identified.
Oh, yeah. Let's see.
That would be a whole big panel.
There's a whole other panel. Let's see. Just going through my notes here. I wrote down a whole bunch of the monsters. Oh, there's the picture of the Flute Man. What did you think about the? Again, we're talking about not looking normal. I don't know if this episode was applied today, but there was the season episode about Nala with the beggar man, who was simply scary because he was a guy with no legs. Now, mind you, he would kill people and then hide in their stomach. But still, I mean, it's just like, should we be making a disabled person a monster?
No.
No.
We shouldn't.
Thank you.
No, we shouldn't. Because he was, see, I don't remember that episode, but
Oh.
it sounds like it was more of a defense mechanism than survival.
He would kill people, hide in their body, and then the body ran out. He would escape and then go kill somebody else and then live in their body. No, that one just never sat right with me.
But there are a lot of things in the 90s, especially X-Files, that, like the peacocks. I mean, that whole situation was problematic.
Oh, yeah.
But, they weren't promoting incest. They were saying incest wasn't good and this is what would happen.
Yeah. This is what happens when your family tree does not branch.
Right, and so with Beggar Man, this is what happens to disabled people on the street. That's a terrible message.
That's true.
But that is something that people have a legitimate fear of, homeless people. And,
Oh, yeah.
And disabled people. Is it right that they use that as a thing?
I guess it depends on the presentation too. If you're trying to, I mean, you can make there's two different ways you can tell that story. There's a way you can tell that story, which is the problematic version of, well, he's a monster because he's disabled. And then there's the whole treating them like a person and saying, this is what's happened to them, this is what they've been driven to, and you should, kind of be on their side. So.
Like, did they ever stop and ask Angelica, do you guys need help? Like, what do you need? Is there something we can do to make your life better where you aren't, flying around and attacking people? Like the man bat?
Yes.
Yeah.